and then we left-wingers who won't let us drill for it because they're afraid that somebody's going to make some money. And on top of everything else, we have a Delaware County legislature who just recently slapped on another 3% tax on certain businesses here. So that should tell the business people not to show up here and start creating new jobs. They're not welcome here. So there's many issues that we have for the election, and we have today the pleasure of having Congressman Reed with us here. And thank you so much for coming. Appreciate it. The floor is yours, please.
Well, thank you very much. Always a pleasure. Thank you so much to be up here and to spend some time with you. You know, as we hopefully come together as we go through this election process, we want to make sure that we continue to be available and accessible and traveling around the district. And I hope everybody had a great summer. Hope you had a great Labor Day. I know I spent a little time with my family yesterday, which was good. And I hope you enjoyed it. And as the kids return to school, very exciting times in the Reed household. So I just wanted to say hello, have a conversation with you as to what's going on. But I would be remiss to point out we got some of my opponents, opposition here, filming us. That's all part of the process. So everyone needs to be aware of that. So say hi to Martha. Good to see Martha. And the young man's name, what is your name again? I always forget it.
I don't think we've met before, Mr. Reed.
Did we meet you one time before?
I'm Patrick. I don't think we've been introduced,
Patrick.
but very nice to meet you, sir.
Well, good to see you, Patrick. And where are you from, Patrick?
I just graduated from Geneseo.
From Geneseo. Are you from the area, or where'd you grow up?
I grew up outside of Albany. I'm living in Tompkins County now.
Very good. Very good. Well, welcome, Patrick.
Thank you.
Welcome you here. And so as we go forward, I just always want to introduce the people in the room and make sure everyone welcomes this process and embraces the process. And I also wanted to point out some of our campaign workers that are with us tonight. Nick, introduce yourself.
Hey guys, Nick Weinstein. I'm Tom's political director, so I help him manage all his volunteers and knock on all the doors and do all the phone calls that will hopefully lead him to victory. So.
And we got two other, Logan and Grant are with us.
Hi, I'm Logan. I'm the Southern Tier Field Coordinator, so I work closely with Nick gathering volunteers as well.
I'm Grant. I'm an intern, president of the Republican Club at Ithaca College.
There we go. All right, well, as Ray pointed out, obviously there's some big issues facing the country and continue to face the country. As you know, I ran in 2010 to go to Washington, D.C. to do something, not to be something. And I think we're making some baby steps in the right direction. But as I got there, you know, a lot of us thought when we went in 2010, and I was one of them, that, you know, we could go down there, 2 years, turn this ship around, and things would be all taken care of. But obviously that's not the case. Because the problems we face as a nation have been created over decades, and we need new leadership, and I think we have demonstrated some of that new leadership in the House, but it's going to take a while, much longer than the 2 years we originally anticipated to achieve that success and to put the country in the position where she blossoms and provides opportunities for generations to come. Now, I say that with recognizing some of the success we've had. You know, $18 trillion in national debt is not a success. That is a problem. That is a big problem. And as many of you go into our town halls, and we've had numerous town halls around the district, as you all know, we've talked about the debt quite a bit. And because that long-term threat that it represents to the country is real. And a lot of folks right now are looking at what the Federal Reserve is doing, what the central bankers around the world are doing. And a lot of times what I see is a lot of concern because they're losing some of the major tools that they used to have available to them because that debt is so large. And one of the major tools is the interest rates that America is subject to. And as you know, we are at historically low interest rates right now. And one of the reasons that interest rates, I'm very concerned, if they ever spike up, when you look at the debt service payment on that $18 trillion worth of debt, you go from about $200 billion plus or minus. If it goes up to 6-8%, you're going to get debt payments of $800 to $1 trillion alone out of the $3.6 trillion that we spend every year. That's a real problem. Because if you have to take $1 trillion, $800 billion, and apply it to a debt payment just to be solvent on your debt, you know your household incomes. You know that doesn't work. That is going to be a real crisis in the making as we go forward. So we're going to continue to fight that. Now, when we went to Congress, you know, we were at about $1 trillion plus on average budget deficits. We're down to about 450 to 500 billion based on the most recent estimates that are there. That's still not good enough. I want to get to surplus, but we're going in the right direction. And one of the key things to this solution, to this debt issue, and that's why we talk about it a great deal on the campaign trail and on our day-to-day activity down in Washington, D.C., is if we can grow the economy. Jobs is not a political issue. Jobs is a substantive solution to America's problems. Because if we get more people working, we'll have more people contributing, i.e. to the taxes that we already pay, which are extraordinarily high and way too high for my personal opinion. But also you take people off the system. And so if you can take them off the system, you can get people more contributing. And also, if we do what we've been doing in Washington, and that is to get back to a more fundamental, constitutionally based, limited federal government and downsize this federal government, now you've got a full package of a solution that needs to be implemented. So we continue to do that. We continue to promote jobs. We don't do it for political purposes. It really is a key, substantive portion of our solution. Thank you for coming. Welcome. Good to see you. And so you'll see us talking quite a bit about those jobs going forward. And one of the things, when we always talk about jobs, one of the things I get concerned with, because I've had a lot of conversations down in D.C. with folks from the other side of the aisle. We sit down, you know me, I'm the youngest of 12. I'll talk and listen to anybody. We're willing to do that, and we're willing to have those conversations. And one of the things that gets lost in D.C. is I've had conversations when folks say, well, if it's a public job or a private job, it's still a job. I think there's a fundamental difference between the two of them. A private sector-based job is creating new wealth. Public sector is coming out of taxpayer dollars, putting it from one pocket into another pocket. Now that doesn't mean we don't need public employees. We need people in the military. Yeah, fewer, but we need them. We recognize them. But that can't be the heart of the economic engine. The heart of the economic engine, in my personal opinion, is the private sector, where we build things again. Where we build them here and sell them there. You hear me say that quite often, because I firmly believe it. I'm a firm believer in U.S. manufacturing. I believe manufacturing sits at the precipice, it's at the cliff of a huge renaissance. And one of the reasons, not least of which, is the development of our natural resources, natural gas and oil. Now we all agree that they have to be developed safely, responsibly. That we all agree on. There's not a soul out there, I think, that wants to destroy our environment and at the cost of getting those resources. That's not the standard, that's not the case. And so as we develop those resources, we're not only talking about the jobs that are associated with developing those resources, that resource is providing low-cost, stable utility rates for our U.S. manufacturers. It's providing feedstock, the supply chains that go into U.S. manufacturing, for example, at very low cost and in our backyard type of opportunity there. That really is a game changer when it comes to our economic outlook for America. I'm the eternal optimist. And also, as Rainer pointed out, the foreign policy issues that we face in Russia, he references natural gas in Russia. Don't lose sight of the ability to control our domestic energy sources does for us in regards to our position in the world. We can control our energy security, and I'll point it out there. How many of you remember if the Middle East was in the situation like it is today, what typically happened? Anyone? Gas prices went up, right? Because of what? Fear, right? It jeopardized the markets, right? It sent a shockwave through the oil markets and the oil futures. What's going on with the price of oil today? I don't know if you've noticed it.
It's actually come down.
It's going down. And I'll tell you, the EIA, the energy, there's so many acronyms out of DC, I think it's the Energy Information Administration or something like that, out of the Department of Energy, that brings in the data. One of their conclusions is because we have the ability to control a lot of that domestic oil and natural gas production here on North American sources. That's bringing stability to the market. That's real benefits to real hardworking taxpayers in America, because every time you go to the pumps, if you can keep that gas price down, that's more money that stays in your pocket. And I'm a firm believer in that as we go forward. So we got a lot of problems, but there's some opportunities that are out there. And we're going to continue to champion, and we're going to continue to push them. And that is one of the reasons why I co-chair the U.S. Manufacturing Caucus. That's why I also co-chair the U.S. Natural Gas Caucus, because that's an area of interest where I see as a path to solutions to really help hardworking taxpayers in America out. We're going to continue the fight. I can assure you. We believe that there's a lot of opportunity, but there's a lot of struggles. And I came here to listen. You know, as I go out and talk to people, we do these town halls, and all due respect to my opponent, doesn't seem to want to go out and talk and listen to people and, you know, articulate what she believes. We'll put our record up against anyone. And one last point. We're not all going to agree. We're all not going to agree 100%. I represent 717,000 people. And every time I go to the floor and I vote, I take that obligation very seriously. And I recognize we're not always going to have 717,000 people say, yep, that's the right way to go. But I promise you this, we're going to continue to keep showing up. I'm showing up tonight. We showed up before. We're going to show up around the district, and I'm going to keep listening. And I want to bring your voice to Washington, D.C., not the other way around that a lot of these elected officials get stuck with. They get stuck in the D.C. area. I come home every weekend, I spend time with my family, and then I go out and I talk to people, and I listen to people. And it's your input that is critical to me. So thank you for what you're doing. I stay engaged, and I'll tell you, it's so important that we do. Because so many people want to just kind of give up, and I hear it, and I see it, and they want to throw their hands up and say, there's no way that we're going to be able to solve these problems, they're too big. But once you do that, then the future of the country's at stake, and it's not going in the right direction. We have to stay engaged, we have to participate, and I implore you, continue to participate. And anything you do for us in regards to campaign activity, carrying petitions and getting out there and signing those petitions and doing all that type of work, I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you very much for doing that. My family and I personally thank you. And, there's not, used to be 2 of me. I'm down 110 pounds. Things are going the right way there. I don't know if you recognize that. But we're healthy, we're ready to go, and please join us and continue to support us. I really do appreciate it. And it's well worth the fight, because the future of America and our kids' and grandkids' future is really what's at stake here. So we'll continue with it. So with that, those are my opening remarks. We never go by script, right? So whatever you want to talk about, we're here to talk and get your input.
One of the concerns I see is it seems like there's a lot of federal bureaucracies that are job killers, and I think mainly the EPA. There's a lot of press about some of the shenanigans that they pull. Is there any way to rein some of that in? I mean, is Congress aware of some of this stuff that's going on?
Yeah, the question or input is about how to rein in the agencies. Seems to be a lot of regulations, bigger government coming down on the private sector and killing jobs and putting people in deficit. And is Congress aware of it? I'm definitely aware of it, and many members are well aware of it. You have many examples out there. EPA is what you referenced in your comments, and that's probably one of the best examples of this overreach. When you have the navigable waters, I don't know if you guys have noticed what's going on there. Now, about 4 years ago, we had this battle before. We put a big spotlight on it, and we pushed them back, but they're coming again. Now, they will tell you, oh, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. We're not doing anything in regards to it. But I'll tell you, there's, I don't know if you've seen some maps out there that we discovered in the EPA where they were looking at navigable waters and how far that goes. And if they take the term navigable out of the statute, every U.S. water potentially is subject to regulations from Washington, D.C. That is an overreach, in my humble opinion. And how do we combat it? That's the question. How do you do that? We do it because of folks like you who get engaged. We do it by taking that energy where people hear about what's coming, and then they reach out to us. That's why this conversation is so important. And then we spotlight it. And that's been successful. You've heard the spilled milk story, where EPA was going to regulate dairy farms as spilled milk hazardous waste sites because they're oil and spilled milk. There were some bureaucrats that were contemplating doing that. They said, oh no, we were never really serious about that. But they were contemplating it because they're looking at the statute and they're looking at it and saying, oh, we can regulate it, so we might as well kind of see if we can reach in there. And when you put a spotlight on it, that is very effective. The other tool that we use is we do get their attention with the power of the purse. The constitutional and the House of Representatives, the power of the purse originates there. And that is one thing that, though, it's not going to be the cure-all. The power of the purse is something And usually we have our town hall meetings and we show where the money is spent and how it's spent. Now remember, a lot of the federal government, as I've come to know, is on autopilot spending. It's out of the discretionary lines, and it kind of just goes year after year after year because elected officials delegated that authority away from Congress. We're trying to bring that back. That's part of the long-term solution in Congress that we're trying to be part of. Bring that back to Congress and go through that regular order, put more of a spotlight on the regular spending rather than this autopilot. But it is something that gets their attention. So we use the power of the purse, we spotlight it, and I'll tell you, the spotlight is probably the most effective tool that's out there. I'll just be honest with you. When these guys have to answer, when they're pulled out of their cubicles, when they're pulled out of their bureaucratic safety area, they run. So we're continuing to push it. And you know, there's 43 jobs bills sitting in the Senate right now. A lot of them deal with cutting and curtailing regulatory overreach like that. But the Senate, that's a whole different beast. Remember, it goes from the House to the Senate, and we both work together. But Harry Reid's chosen to push back on a lot of those, 43 jobs bills, 350 plus pieces of legislation we passed in the House and are sitting over there waiting for action. Very frustrated. Yeah.
There won't be any action. You won't do it.
What's that?
Harry Reid won't do it. There won't be any action. And the power of the purse, you talk about it, I haven't seen it. The debt just keeps going higher and higher and higher. Talk is cheap. We've been waiting for years. We keep hearing next election, next election, next election. When are you people going to stand up and fight and use the power of the purse? You can do it. Don't worry about, do what's right for us in our country. Your kids will be protected when all this crap hits the fan. My kid won't. So when are you going to stand up for we the people? All you people do is think about yourselves. You don't think about us. You're here vote time. I need your help. You don't help us at all. We want you out of the way and the regulations cut, and all we get is more and more and more and more. Pay more, pay more, pay more. Talk is cheap. Do something about it. It's time to stand up and fight. The other side wants to destroy America. They don't like it the way it was founded. They hate it. And you people need to learn it's a battle. This is not let's just reach across the aisle and compromise. It's the future of this country, and it's now. It's not next election. It's not next year. It's not 10 years from now. It's now. Start doing something about it instead of talking.
I appreciate that.
Well, you should, because I don't appreciate what you all are doing in D.C. You're doing nothing for us.
Well, and I share that frustration with where we're at in D.C. And I would, like I said, when I went in 2010, 2 years, let's turn it around, let's get it taken care of, let's balance the budget in those years. But you need partners that are willing to do that. You need a White House that's willing to have the real debate. You need a Senate that will engage in the debate and say, you know what, we need to take care of this. And what gives me a lot of hope, when you talk to folks privately, like we have had it in the White House and others, they recognize, even their own reports, if you look at what they put out there in black and white, they recognize the path that we are on is not sustainable. So more and more members are coming together, we're getting together in more and more groups where more of us are saying, you know what, these are real problems that we gotta face. So we're going in the right direction, in my humble opinion. Is it fast enough? No, it's not. I agree with that. But I want to caution folks to make sure that, you know, if we go down the path, some people are stressing sometimes this take over the government, take it over, and kind of that type of mentality. I'm not of that mindset. My mindset is this system has worked for 200 plus years. And the founding fathers, when you read their wisdom and you read how they made it difficult for America to implement radical change overnight, that's allowed us to have a tremendous amount of stability in our government. But what we need is the people. We need the people to stand up like you're doing right now and say, you know what, this is serious, and I demand of my president, I demand of my Senate, and I demand of the House to take care of this problem and get engaged. I mean, it pains me.
But when he bypasses Congress, you got to do something. And his words were fundamentally transform America. And he's doing it in 6 years, quick. And there are no brakes on it. And there needs to be something, or it's way too late. Way too late.
Is fight the fights that we. And I hear where you're coming from. I really do.
Or order to throw in the garbage.
Go ahead.
My question is about SARS. I know they've been around for a while, it's not just Obama, but how did they get out of the constitutional line of where these people are checked for background? And, you know, I spent 20 years in the Air Force and I had a very technical job. And every year I put in an update on my background investigation because they wanted to make sure I still was going what I should be going, and doing something else. I wasn't given access because I was a nice guy, it's because I was doing my job right. These people are in the White House now, they have Muslim Brotherhood, they're in key positions, they're making laws. How do we turn that around? How did they ever get those positions where we give a president 40 more czars, and we have a cabinet, 12 cabinet members that he doesn't meet with, he doesn't recognize. The cabinet members had to go through the constitutional process of being vetted by both the House of Representatives and the Senate. These fellows are given a blank check and they're given a position at a desk in the White House. And you and I just can't walk up to the door and go to as an American citizen anymore. What's going on? Why can't we change it? Why can't Congress come up with something that makes a background check? Get these guys out of there. They don't meet the background check. They don't meet the requirements. Get out.
Well, two things, maybe to offer a response to that. One, obviously, there's a movement afoot, I guess, in the executive branch, if you would, to see how far they can push that executive authority. I think they're studying that right now on the immigration issue, for example. And that is a real problem. That is a real problem. And one of the strongest arguments, as a second point I would offer that we have used in Washington, D.C. effectively is, look, he's not going to be president forever. He's not. And so the issue then becomes, once you recognize that that power has been established, what are you going to do? And this is me talking to people on the other side. What are you going to do when a president that you don't agree with utilizes those powers? And that checks and balance of what our founding fathers had in mind, that gets a lot of people concerned. They're like, you're absolutely right. And they get to join us and they start saying, you know what, we got to push back. And they're making calls over to the White House and say, hey, you know what, be careful here. You're going beyond the scope of what the Constitution envisioned for us. And I find that to be effective. But at the same time, I recognize, and I know, I recognize there was an election. And the president said something to us in a meeting that really resonated with me. Because elections have consequences. And he won. And you have to recognize that. You do have to recognize that, because if you don't recognize that, then you don't recognize the system that our founding fathers put in place that we need to utilize in order to get the country going in the direction that we believe it should go. And that's why it's so important to vote, engage. That's why we've stayed engaged over the last 2 years and will remain engaged. We get out there. We do that more than most members. A lot of members that get back to DC, they go, why are you doing that? Aren't you afraid you're going to get yelled at? Aren't you afraid you're going to get caught on the TV or the videotape saying something that's going to cost you the election? I say, oh, that's my job. That's my job to do that, is to listen to people. And if you can't stand up in front of a camera, if you can't stand up in front of a group of people and maybe disagree but have a conversation, well, then maybe you're in the wrong business. And that's part of the problem, in my opinion, in DC. You got too many people that want to hide rather than lead, and we're trying to lead.
Well, not only that, they can't get their message out because of the media, but a lot of the frustration, which has now become anger with the populace, is not that they disagree with our form of government, what the founders laid out. It's just what we've been hearing is that we strayed so far away from the guiding principles, and they don't trust, and they're trying to electrify the voting public to get out and vote when so many of them think it doesn't work anymore. Last election, you hear stories about precincts where they had more votes than they had registered voters, or 100% of the vote went for Obama, not a single vote for, you hear these stories. And so then the public says, why, what's going on with our system? Congress, your investigations, they go on and on and on, and you wonder, is a hammer ever going to fall on it? These people are corrupt, Fast and Furious, the IRS, the Veterans Administration, the IRS, that goes on. You wonder, without the Senate going along with it, will anything ever really be done? Or will it just go on because Harry Reid stands in the way? And he can get up on national media and say anything he wants, and you know, the borders are closed, they're secure. And I'm saying, I'm begging you, you know, what's going on with the people?
But let me offer some food for thought, maybe continue the conversation. Take, for example, 2010, when we got engaged, and there was the wave that went across the country. What happens if people took the attitude, you know what, we're not going to get engaged? What do you think would happen with a continuation of an unchecked President Obama that has control of the House, the Senate, and the White House? And ladies and gentlemen, to a large degree, I think some of that they want to have. Can you imagine a President Obama that doesn't have a check of the House for the last 2 years of his administration, that doesn't have a re-election to be concerned about? You talk about the comment, hey, give me past election, we'll have more flexibility. That was an insight into the man, into the president. You know, once you get through the politics, that pressure point that was affecting his decision-making is no longer there. So if he has the control of all levers of government, that is why we cannot disengage. We cannot lose the trust in the system that the Founding Fathers put in place so that we can control our own destiny. I get very passionate about it because I believe in it. I believe that is the path we have to go forward. Yeah.
My name is Don Johnson. We're coming up on a new fiscal year. I'm hoping sequestration was a joke last year. I hope they don't even try doing anything like that. If it's going to be cuts, it's cuts. Don't play games. I'm also a GS employee. I'm a reservist of the Army. You got to make cuts. You do it. Don't buckle, because that's the way I viewed it. Is that we said, all right, we're going to stand fast, but then we didn't stand fast. So we came out of basically nothing. When I say we, I mean people that are conservative and want to try to uphold the ideals and get to a balanced budget someday. The unfortunate thing is, and I don't even know if many Americans know it, all those U.S. government employees that were laid off for that short period of time were actually paid back pay for all that. So they actually had double pay, if you think about it. They had stressful vacation, I guess, and then they got paid for it, which was unfortunate. Then our president directs certain things to be cut back to actually harm our communities. Cutting back on guards at prisons, telling, closing off basically Washington, D.C. to tourists, Americans. And it probably costs more money to have park rangers there to keep people out than it did to have one or two volunteers there to make sure no one put on the face any of the monuments. And I tell you what, any American that was there and saw someone facing the monument, they probably ought to call 911 because that individual was probably going to get their butt whooped. So it's silliness, and I'm kind of surprised that this is going to go on for a while.
That's okay. No, I appreciate it.
Even with Obamacare, the Affordable Health Care Act, which is a farce in itself, increasing the size of government, increasing debt to the Americans, and then the Americans, you should have been one of them. The Americans across the nation should have been in the streets protesting when their president said, if you like your health care plan, you can keep it. If you like your doctor, you can keep it. Bold-faced lies to the American people. And yet we swallow this stuff and sit here and do nothing. I mean, we're doing something, but it's not enough. And I know you said, the framers of our government called for, gradual change, compromise, checks and balances, but we don't recognize that. And we, the government, do not recognize the checks and balances. Mr. Passo mentioned about how agencies are basically setting up laws and interfering and overreaching. Well, back when I was in school, I remember there's 3 branches. The legislative to make the laws, the judicial to judge whether they're constitutional and legal, and then the executive to enforce it. But yet we got an executive branch that's making laws and picking and choosing what laws they'll enforce. So there's a lot of frustration here. And I'm kind of embarrassed that Americans across this country didn't go take it to the streets. I mean, Ukrainians, they took it to the street. Poland, when they came out of a communist rule, they took it to the street. East Germans took it to the street. I was there when the wall came down. It's crazy that we sit here so complacent and just keep on swallowing this basically crap sandwich we're forced to eat.
Well, Don, I appreciate that. And that is why, so I asked the question, why was the president making those determinations in regards to where to allocate the resources and not? Politics, right? That's what it boiled down to.
Right.
Politics. It's about an election. It's about a political. Look, we got to get our power back so that we have unfettered control. For the last 2 years of the administration, it's kind of what some of the mindset that I face in DC all the time. It is frustrating. And that's why I will go across and I say, listen, put that all aside. Enough is enough. We need to fix these problems. And we're making some headway there. But when you see the population, and some population just wants to walk away because they're so fed up with it and they're frustrated with it. Others are so busy, and I know they're caring a lot with their day-to-day lives. But this is where we have to ignite the passion. We have to engage, because if we don't engage, the path we're on is the path that we'll continue on. And we have to step up. And I'll tell you, it's politics 24/7 down in Washington, D.C. You talk about things like, so we're initiating the lawsuit to bring against the president. That is respecting the Constitution, because you're absolutely right. There's 3 branches, right? Executive branch, legislative, judicial. We're going to the judicial branch and saying once and for all to the judicial branch, you need to step up. And the Supreme Court has ruled. Look at recently, the NLRB decision, 9-0. President Obama's own 2 justices voted to curtail and say, you overstepped the executive authority in the appointments to the NLRB. So the branch needs to be brought in and use the system. Because you know what they did when we talked about the lawsuit? What did you hear? What did you hear back through the media? What was that all about? Yeah, well, it started, and they used another term. They, the other side, used the other term. It was with an I. Okay, right. There you go. Do you know what they did with that? Do you know how much money they raised in 72 hours off of that? Where nobody was talking about impeachment. No one's talking about impeachment. And we recognize where the Senate's at. We know where that's at. Do you know how much money they raised in 72 hours? On the other side, on the congressional campaign that's helping my opponent out? About $4 to $5 million, given our best estimate. $4 to $5 million in the organization that they executed in order to raise money on something that wasn't even what we were discussing. So I put that out there because as we engage in this process, we need to make sure that you understand there's a political process and there's a policy process. I'm trying to have the policy process drive the political debate, but in my humble opinion, many people down in DC want the political process to drive the policy, put politics first. We have to stop that. And we can't play into the hand of giving them, that soundbite or that, piece that they can use and raise $4 to $5 million in 72 hours on. We need to just trust the system, in my humble opinion, engage, and the more we engage, as we talked about the regulatory pushback, when people engage and they put the spotlight on DC, these guys run for cover. And you find out who the good ones are. You find out who the good ones are in the sense of if they stand in the spotlight and they say, okay, this is what I believe. And we may fundamentally disagree with them, but at least they're willing to stand up and say, okay, this is what we believe. The ones that are there because, ooh, I like the title, I like the little pomp and circumstance, the pin, so to speak, you find out real quick who they are. And that's what we do. We kind of look for them, we kind of look for the allies, people that we're going to partner with that are there to get something done.
Talking about policies like iron boards, I just became aware of the fact that EPA, when they send people out for their inspections, etc., they have weapons, pistols, and handcuffs on their belt, etc. And what did their policy go about? And because they want to regulate guns, and that they're allowing EPA officers to carry them.
IRS agents also.
IRS agents also.
Why is this? And what can we do about it? What should we do about it? Complain?
Why is it? That's another question that I don't have an answer other than the bigger government, the expansion of government, and kind of that police expansion that we're seeing. And how we curtail it, how we deal with it, is when someone abuses that authority, someone goes after it, we have to go after them and hold them accountable. And I know the IRS investigation, I give that as an example. A lot of people, it's not fast enough. Well, because it takes time. And we're also, when we deal with people like Lois Lerner, and then they use the Constitution the way it was designed, that's a constitutional right, and those become roadblocks. But when you're involved in a deception, we all know the lesson. We all learned the lesson. You create that web of deception, it starts to unfold. And that's what we're seeing more and more of. You're seeing the information coming out where the phone was wiped on purpose. You're seeing that, oh, maybe we can get this stuff because it's backed up in another area. Because we're continuing to push, especially on the Ways and Means Committee. We're pushing. And I'll tell you, I've seen it firsthand in regards to, we sent the employees. Remember what the first spin of the story was? This is a group of employees out of Cincinnati that have gone rogue and that type of thing. But we went and talked to those employees. We said, you might have some problems here. Well, they started saying, I'm going to jail because of what these people did. And then it fared it up, and the pressure's cooking. Now that doesn't answer your question specifically, but that's where the people have the power, and they still have the power in America, and we need to push back on it as we go forward. And as you see that, we want to know about it. We want to know if there's an abuse there. We want to know it. That's why we're out here also, is to see where people are overstepping the line and push back on it.
Even if there's an abuse, why has our society become so angry, I guess is the word I would use, that they have to have a policy such as this? Do they really need that protection? I mean, I'm ignorant of that fact.
Well, obviously, I'm a big supporter of law enforcement. Our police officers, our state troopers, and they put their life on the line many nights and days for us, and I'll continue to stand with them. I think part of the problem we're facing, there's a lot of frustration in America. There's a lot of frustration with where we're going, and I think a lot of folks are maybe expressing that, maybe in a way we haven't seen in a while. When we have good times, we all know it in our own personal lives. When you're going, you have a job and you're putting a little money away, you're taking care of the family, you're going on vacation, or things seem to be better. But when things are stressful, you see a different outcome. So maybe that's part of it as we go forward. Yeah.
I'm Randy, there, supervisor of this town.
Thanks for
that. Along with Don and quite a few others. I think we hit the nail right on the head. It's the policies. Between the federal government, the state governments, they put all these policies on the small towns. They do not back it up with revenue. So we're stuck with all these policies, things that we have to abide by. And it comes out of the taxpayers. All we can do is increase the taxes to pay for these policies that are handed down from up above. My main gripe right now is you had Hurricane Sandy and Katrina that affected a lot of people. And the government spent millions and millions and millions of dollars helping those people out. And that's fine. But we have a little problem here, according to the government. We have a storm that goes through and wipes out a bridge. It's going to cost our taxpayers $500,000. I can't get one penny from any of the governments. And that is not right. They should have some kind of policies that would help individual towns and counties take care of these situations that we have. If they're going to make these policies, it's got to come down to the towns and counties also, not just federal governments or not big cities or New Jerseys, New York cities, and all these other things. It's got to come down from up above, and it's got to be you people that make those policies.
Well, Supervisor, appreciate that. No, I'm aware of the situation over there. It was frustrating not being able to help more than we could in that situation. But what you're touching upon is exactly the point that we're all talking about here. If the federal government comes back, because what a lot of elected officials will hear when they hear that, will say, okay, so you want me at the DC federal level to take it all over. So that if you have a ditch that washes out that costs $10,000, federal government's gonna come in and provide that $10,000 worth of aid. The problem that I would offer that you may want to consider in regards to that is that perpetuating a bigger government at the federal level. And I'm a big states' rights guy. I'm a big local government is the better government. It's your taxpayer dollar. Keep it in your communities. Keep it in your residents' pockets. And when there's a disaster, I'd be very supportive of coming together, trying to figure out how to help communities out. But I caution you, because a lot of times I've heard that requests, and there are elected officials in Washington, D.C. that will latch onto that and say, okay, then you want me to expand the federal government. That's not what I want to do in Washington, D.C. I want to get the federal government downsized. I want to empower you as supervisor to have more flexibility to deploy what you need to do for this community, because the guys in Washington, D.C., to me, don't know your community as good as you do.
I understand that, and I don't blame you for trying to keep government small. But when I see grants and things going out to places that don't even deserve grants, then that's where I get upset big time.
And I agree with you. And that's where we stand together. And we say, you know, when you see the abuse, when you see it going to a place that doesn't deserve it, frustrating. And you know, one of the biggest things, and this is the other thing I'll never lose sight of, one of the biggest things I fight in Washington, D.C. is that they will say, oh, Tom, it's $1 million. I've had this on the floor. I mean, I went after $100,000 one time, and they came down and said, oh, it's $100,000. Who gets it? I said, that's $100,000. That's a lot of money. That's taxpayer dollars. That's not your money. You know, elected officials, that's a taxpayer's money. And so we fight that every day. That mentality of, oh, don't worry about it, it's just money. No, it's people's work to give that money to the government. And when you see it go to the wrong places, and you see, that, for example, one of the first things we did, we were building a sewer system in Tijuana, Mexico. Mexico's doing pretty good right now. I'm like, why are we doing that? And we uncovered that, and we put pressure on it, and we backed them off. And, you know, that was some of the process of what we were.
So we're not coming here for flush and toilets,
I just see all this money going down to the bill deals that are coming in all over the place. And we're throwing money at that. I know it's billions, it's not billions, it's billions of dollars.
We just can't afford it.
Can't afford it anymore. And what we need to do is, we need to really have the debate. This is one of the things I'm hoping this campaign season will go into, and if not this season, the presidential season. We need a national debate about priorities. What are our priorities? And we need to make sure that our priorities are in order. And that's where, and you base those priorities not on what Washington, D.C. says are the priorities, but what you, the people, we the people, set the priorities. And that's why when I look at it, I start national security is always up to the top. You know, taking care of our vets, taking care of our men and women that are asked to go in harm's way, that is a priority. And then we continue down the path. We've been very supportive of infrastructure investments. I continue to make that a national priority. I believe in that infrastructure investment for interstate commerce, the world economy, putting us in a position so that we can travel back and forth and have that commerce, that interstate commerce represented. But please, ma'am.
As I sat here for the last 40 minutes listening, I hear frustration, and I hear you talk about investments and resources, but what I don't hear you talking about is the future. Our future, our most valuable resource today is our children. Yet we're not investing in them. We're building jails. We're putting them away faster. We're in a drug and alcohol society that we're spending all this money in there, but we're not investing in our children. They're not born criminals. They're not born drug addicts. But this country is forgetting about our children and putting them on the front line and investing in them. We are ranked one of the poorest countries in this world, being a leading industrial country for protecting our children. We're up top of the #1 rate of child abuse within the global. We have Taiwan that outranks the United States in protecting their children. When are we going to invest in our children instead of putting in all these social programs and trying to fix them when they're in these correctional facilities when they don't correct? I've contacted your office to ask about if you're going to vote for the Children's Justice Act and funding in our children. And I can't tell you that we don't make commitments. He votes when he's on the floor. 1 out of every 4 girls by the time she's 18 will be sexually abused. 1 out of every 6 boys by the time they're 18. They're national statistics. Look around this room. I just said here, statistically wise, there is child abuse victims in this room that are survivors today, but never had the courage to come out and tell. When are we gonna start investing in our children and giving them the hope? We don't invest in them today, you know what, tomorrow when we need them, and it starts turning 65 and I'm coming up for my Social Security, they're not gonna invest in me because I turned my back on them. We need to invest in our children today so they invest in this country, they invest in our future.
Appreciate that. I would say to children in particular, I think we're united in our commitment there. And that's why a lot of folks got engaged in 2010. You know, the national debt and everything that's associated with it. It's for the future of our children and our grandchildren. That's what motivated me to run and put my hat in the ring, so to speak, was for the children. And when you talk about things like sexual abuse, I can tell you, personally, having gone through the last 2 years of our life, in my life, watching my niece be raped in that whole situation, those types of priorities are something I can stand with. And we can stand with you in regards to that. But to say blanketly that we have turned our back on all of our children, I would respectfully disagree. I think that's what motivates a lot of good people in Washington, D.C., is that they're doing it for their children and grandchildren. Now, don't mistake what I just said there. There are a lot of people in Washington, D.C. that are motivated solely for their own purposes, and we need to call them out. We need to spotlight them. We need to go after them and say, this isn't about you. This is about our children. This is about the future of the country. And where we can agree, and I don't think anyone here in this room would disagree with you in regards to making that a priority. I don't, anyone disagree with standing up for our children that are the victims of abuse, of situations. And so what we need to do is say, okay, how are we going to make that priority? How are we going to have the resources if the national debt interest rates go up to that $1 trillion that we talked about in my opening comments? You got $3.6 trillion that you're spending. We're coming up short about $500 billion. Where are you going to find that $1 trillion? What's that going to crowd out in regards to investments for our children, for our national security? That's why we have to fix this problem now. It doesn't get better with age. Now, we're going down the right path, but we have to do it faster, and we have to do it as a national priority for us coming together and uniting the country, rather than divide, let the politics play out, and then all of a sudden politics is ruling the day.
When you see the growing school violence, you see a number of our citizens that are young citizens going over and joining these terrorist organizations. Somewhere in between there, they felt this country turned their back on them. How are we going to fix it? How are we going to step up as a nation and say, we believe in this country, we believe in you as our future, we support you, this is not the right way to do it. We can't continue filling up prisons. That's costing our system. We can't continue doing these social programs because that's costing our system. We need to be able to fix it somehow. And it needs to be fixed here because it's driving me out of my district. I'm educated here, I grew up here, but I have to leave to go get a job because it's nothing here anymore.
Yeah.
There's nothing here anymore. My children are now moving out of the area and going to school because there's nothing here. This district, this county, the state is not investing in our children. We need to take a better look at that and keep us here. Keep us more focused on what we need to do as priority. Just starting here locally, as you said, but building it where it's grows statewide and federal-wise. State can't do it by themselves. Local definitely can't do it by ourselves, because what I've learned, local don't have a voice when they're going up against metropolitan areas. You got 4 or 5 people in there voting. There's more kids that are sexually abused in the rural counties than there are in the metropolitan areas. But yet they don't get the resources. You tell them they have to do this, this, and this, but you don't give them the resources to back it.
And that's where we have to come together, and we have to stand and be supportive of that priority that you just articulated. And that's where we're going to continue to do that, because you do have that fight. And when you talk about opportunities in New York, for example, then that to me always begs the question, why is that happening? Why is it happening? And I'll point to, I'll offer you some ideas. Regulation, taxes, driving people out. I've talked to so many small businesses and employers and things, and it frustrates me when I hear folks, oh, you gotta hammer the employer, you gotta hit that person because they're abusing their people and their employees. I will tell you, when I was a small business owner, and most small business owners that I know, employees are part of your family. They do well, you do well. You do well, they do well. That's good business. And that's where I get frustrated with DC and those policies that are driving people out. And why is that happening? Again, putting politics over policy. We need to have the policy leading the country again, so that we can stand up and say, you know what, you have a job now because we've created an environment where the private sector blossoms, where you have an opportunity to raise your family in your home, and you have that fabric of a society that's there. Your grandparents, your parents, your cousins, your nieces, your nephews, that whole family, that social fabric that has made us great for generations. I would agree. We continue on this path. That's jeopardized. And that network of support that is needed in those situations, especially in those terrible situations where you have children that are subject to that type of abuse, I know it firsthand. We as a family came together in our situation and stood as a family. And I will always stand with my family. But we're starting to lose that. And a lot of times folks will say, I can't do it, I need you, the government, to do it for us. And I really do believe that it has to rest with the family and the people. Yeah, right.
Thank you. Don said that we should take to the streets here, and I would like to remind you that in 2010 we did. Joyce and Arnie and Marlis traveled to Washington D.C. You know, to demonstrate there. And what did we get? Well, we got a Republican majority, and we got the weakest possible leadership that you can imagine, that has spent more time going after the conservative part or the party than going after Obama. They're scared of him. They're not scared of the Tea Party. My suggestion would be that when you again have a chance here in a few months to vote for a speaker, consider somebody else than owner there.
But I will, let's not forget the success of 2010. Because if 2010 didn't happen, you would have had policies that were initiated much worse than where we find ourselves today. And we would not be traveling down the path of going to $500 billion worth of budget deficit. We'd be going the other way. Because the mindset, that's there. And we need to make sure we don't lose sight of that.
Well, thank you guys for having us. I think we have time for one more question before we have to hit the roads. If anybody.
Please.
First, thank you this evening for your words of encouragement. I know you're working hard. You're just an individual, and there's a lot ahead. And we're just hoping the next election, and the Senate especially, will help you go a little faster. But you say engage. Well, we did, all of us. We've been to DC a couple of big marches, and I was so impressed. It was my first time participating. And it was common people that love America and for what it stands for. And there were probably close to 1 million. Of course, it was always downplayed in the media, thousands, they said. But we have an aerial view picture of it, and we know it was close to 1 million or a little plus. And we engaged. We were there. We conducted ourselves in a proper way. We cleaned up the grounds before we left, so there was no extra work for anybody. And I was so proud to be part of that. But then you start getting demonized by the Reeves and the Pelosi's, and for something we did out of the love of this country. Now, why isn't that spirit in more people to go forward and be part of something like that? And how can especially the Senate, when I hear from Reid and Pelosi and different ones that say we're fanatics or maybe even subversive, undercutting the nation,
Thank you. Mayor, thank you.
Thanks again for coming, appreciate it very much.
Appreciate all you do.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Another thing is that we're gonna have a meeting here in about a month or so, and we're hoping to have some, grants and stuff like that.
Perfect. We'll get you plenty and
We'll make sure you get them, they're on the way, they should be here next week. So as soon as we get them, anybody who signed up, on the sign-up sheet, we'll make sure you get that.
we appreciate you doing that work. We really do. Again, personally, thank you. We'll get it done. We have to stay engaged. We have to fight for what we believe in. No doubt about it. Amen. All right. Thank you. I gotta get this.